Toronto-based artist. Mostly my work is printmaking. It's not all print, but mostly screen printing. In high school, I had been introduced to screen printing, and I don't know, something about it I really liked, that there was this ability to make multiple copies of something. A lot of the images that I work with are found images, like from books or old Boy Scout manuals, things like that. That's something I like to play with a lot, is familiarity and expectation, and how people, like what we think of or what we expect out of an image, or what we think an image is supposed to be about. What I want to do, to an extent, is have work that is talking to a bunch of other things, and that's not just about having one image and having the viewer be like this one-to-one relationship, but having it be part of a larger story. I've worked with these Boy Scout images for a long time, and I was in Scouts till the end of high school, when I was growing up, and grown up looking at these manuals and looking at these images and instructions, and it told a story. It told one version of a story, but I felt like a very different version than what I had experienced with my group. Viewing the Scouts as being very proper and regimental and religious, and but there was also a much more complicated version, which was people trying to figure out themselves or who they were, and how to relate to other people. So that was a bit of the impetus, is kind of exploring that rift between how something is viewed and how something was in reality. The kids were always happy, everyone was always getting along in the depictions, and that I found in reality that definitely wasn't the case. And as a kid going through this, like, you're going through, and as a queer kid more specifically, you're kind of going through this and trying to figure out all of this stuff at the same time, like what it means to have these feelings. I think to look at something and say it's gay implies a certain amount of awareness that's not really there. So sometimes I feel like maybe queerness is maybe more accurate because it's a bit more slippery. But also, like, there's these moments of intimacy that may or may not even mean anything, and a lot of the behavior is dependent on context. There is that subversion of, like, the first thing that you do when someone says this is how you should behave is just have a reaction against it. So part of it is trying to make some kind of a parallel narrative or more complicated narrative that shows not necessarily everyone being happy all the time, but that there's horrific elements or subversive elements or sexual elements. Being in this environment where often we weren't being watched, that there weren't really adults in this world, and if there was, it wasn't necessarily welcomed. Being away from a particular peer group, being in the woods, often you are like staying up at night when everyone else has gone to sleep, and there's no one kind of to say what you can and can't do. We're sharing a sleeping bag together, like, this is kind of exciting, but I don't know why it's exciting. So it's taking those stories or hidden stories and kind of bringing it out a bit more. Specifically, that one was thinking about, like, a kid at home alone in the middle of the afternoon, like digging through mom's drawers and seeing what's there and just kind of playing around. Like, there's kind of an innocence to it. Going back to that idea of just trying to figure out how to be in the world, or how to be a person, or how to perform your gender. Or I don't feel like, okay, you have had to have been a Boy Scout or something, like there's still kind of a familiarity to the imagery. This banner I did was in conjunction with the Pan Am and Para-Pan Am Games. So they were doing all these related events about queerness and sport and culture. So I wanted to make these images that were definitely queer, or that had a queer sensibility to them, and tying into ideas of sport. So that was kind of the starting point of it. With these images, there were elements of these kind of more private or more kind of thoughtful moments, that as opposed to in the sports arena, it's like you're performing, you're putting on a performance, but it's a different performance. You're not necessarily performing your gender, but maybe you're performing, you know, you're running, you're jumping, you're whatever, and that's all a performance. The kind of bearish character guy, he's like in a harness and you know, like leather bear kind of gear, which you wouldn't really compete, but it's like these identifiers of queerness, or you know, it's sort of a putting on of a uniform of a different sort that you would put on just as you would put on any kind of sports uniform. So my initial starting point with these was to make reference to the Goya Disasters of War prints. And it's a series that is really, like, everyone knows, if you're a printmaker, everyone knows of it, or, you know, you're going to be kind of beaten over the head with it. And it evolved as it went, and it became this thing about exploring ideas of, you know, well, I guess the standard things that I deal with often are like ideas of gender or masculinity or sexuality, but also it became about this this history of violence, or this different types of violence, the violence of modern life kind of thing. It's this kid, the one image is this kid winning this award, which says second class, which is like presumably a nice award to win. I don't think but it's also combined with this image of kids playing cowboys and Indians, so you know, making reference to a second class of people, or you know, an image from Iraq that they, you know, all those images came out of these soldiers with the bodies, and then the ears are kind of a direct reference to the Goya images. So that at the time was a bit of a commentary on the characters. Like Goya would like draw these political figures, or these people, and you know, kind of make them more grotesque or demonic to a sense. Those atrocities of war images, and just have all the characters as Boy Scouts, but that just, it was too simplistic for what I was thinking about or what I wanted. So it started to be an exploration of different types of violence, different types of subculture. Yeah, it's like if you have this kind of cartoony characters that look like they're kind of happy, you can cover them in blood and everyone's like, oh, that's cute. But like if you have a photograph of actual horror, it's sort of a much different idea. So there's, you know, it's kind of a cartoony take on things, but it's also, I mean, there's a lot of humor in it, or there's a lot of, I hope there is. And I kind of like to do that as a way to invite people in.